Be weather aware. I mean, there are so many things available to people when they're traveling, when they're at home. And this applies to anywhere you're going to the beach. Take a look at the Hurricane Center forecast. Take a look at any forecast. Also, even when there's not a hurricane or a tropical storm out there, take a look at the riptide forecast because that's very, very important. We lose a few people every year due to riptides.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Carolina Weather Group. Happy to have you this week. And this week we are talking to Tim Haas. He is the communications director for Division One, as well as the public information officer for the North Carolina ferry system. And it is in the middle of summertime. A lot of folks out there vacationing, heading out to the North Carolina coast and the Outer Banks. And so, Tim, before we kind of get into some things that are going on out there at the Outer Banks, what is some tips that you give folks who are maybe traveling this time of the year? What should they be doing? What should they have prepared just in case something was to happen on their travels out to the coast of North Carolina?
Well, I think the first thing, especially considering the subject matter of this blog and podcast, be weather aware. I mean, there are so many things available to people when they're traveling, when they're at home. And this applies to anywhere you're going to the beach. Take a look at the Hurricane Center forecast. Take a look at any forecast. Also, even when there's not a hurricane or a tropical storm out there, take a look at the riptide forecast because that's very, very important. We lose a few people every year due to riptides. So just be weather aware is the main thing. And then, of course, when you're driving out here, it can be crowded. So be careful when you're driving, and when you're walking, please use the crosswalks because that's the best way to stay safe. If you cross the bypass without a crosswalk, it can be dangerous.
And some things that you guys have been doing in North Carolina, I know they've been doing it in South Carolina as well, is you have these big information boards, and on those you may scroll tropical storm watches warnings, flash flood watch warnings. Are those available there in Eastern North Carolina as well?
Yeah, yes, we have several mobile signboards, some permanent signboards all along Highway 12 that will tell you what the road conditions are right then, if there are any problems, and also if there are any watches or warnings that are up. And they're also used for riptide warnings too. So yeah, pay attention to those, but also, there's so many things that you can get on your phone, on your laptop that will tell you what the conditions are going to be when you're here or while you are here. So just keep aware of all the conditions and have a great time.
One thing is you are the public information officer for the ferry system. And I know the ferry system there from Ocracoke is pretty vital because that's the only way to get onto the island and
Yeah.
the only way to get off to the island. So as you guys are monitoring hurricanes, tropical storms, but honestly, just storm systems in general, low pressures, what all goes into that and making sure that those conditions for the ferry to operate are optimum, and maybe what goes into when you start to cancel or delay some of those departure times?
A lot of times it depends on the route and it depends on the wind direction and the wind speed. For instance, we have a couple of routes that go across Pamlico Sound. Once the winds get up to like 35, 40 knots, if they're blowing in the wrong direction, that's when we'll start canceling those runs because things can get rough. As you know, the sound can be very shallow at points. So safety is the number one concern with the ferry division. So if it's not safe to operate, we don't run. And other routes, Hatteras, usually if it's 35, 40 knots, we'll stop running there too. But usually we know ahead of time when that's going to happen. So we have a system called FINS, a Ferry Information Notification System, that can give people alerts on their cell phones or via email that will tell them we're expecting these type of conditions. There may be some schedule interruptions. Please stay aware. We have Facebook pages and X pages for the ferry system. So it's always a good idea to keep aware there too if you're planning to go to Ocracoke. Another thing that I'd like to add is that if you're just going to Ocracoke for the day, if you're not staying for a week or several days, we have a passenger-only ferry that runs from Hatteras right into the heart of Ocracoke Village. And it is the best way to take a day trip because you don't have to wait in the car, the vehicle ferry lines. You get delivered right into the village. There's a free tram service. You can rent bikes. You can rent golf carts. It makes it really easy to know when you're going, to know when you're coming back, and not have to worry about waiting or parking or anything like that. So if you're only going to Ocracoke for the day, that is the perfect way to do it. But all the ferries right now are up and running, and we're expecting a really great summer here.
Speaking of North Carolina 12, we were talking about that. And it doesn't matter if we see tropical storms, hurricanes, nor'easters, or just king tides or high tides in general. What is the best way to get information about Highway 12? I know sometimes there's some overwash and things like that where you have to kind of shut down sections and remove the sand so people can go back and forth. But where can they find that information throughout the summer to make sure that NC12 is operable?
Well, NC12 also has its own Facebook and X pages where we will post again ahead of time. If we see something coming, a king tide, a nor'easter, a hurricane or tropical storm, we'll say, keep aware this is coming. You may not want to drive, on this day or that day. That's a really good way to find out. And then the official closures and things like that can be found on drivenc.gov. That's where if we have to close a road, any road, not just NC12, but any road, it will show up there. So that's the best way to keep aware of the closures and any delays or anything like that.
And some folks who may be visiting out of state may not understand that. So you guys actually even have, I believe, some webcams and stuff out there to kind of show the conditions of what's going on in those particular areas.
Yes, those are all also on drivenc.gov. You just click on show the cameras and there's a map and you can click on the area that you want to look at and it will show you what the road looks like at that moment.
Speaking of summer travel and summer vacation, unfortunately, all predictions are looking like we could see a very active hurricane season. And we know the Outer Banks and Eastern North Carolina are very prone to hurricanes. So what would your suggestion be, people who are coming out to vacation? I know you talked about monitoring the NHC page, but if there was evacuations or anything like that, what do people need to have maybe to bring with them extra on vacation if there was to be a hurricane or tropical storm develop, or just how important it is to evacuate those areas if those warnings or indications are asked of people?
It is especially important to stay weather aware, to know if that storm's coming or where it might be coming, but also to pay very close attention to any evacuation orders. Dare County and Hyde County, Currituck County all have very robust public emergency systems that will tell people if they need to evacuate, and they need to listen. I know, a lot of people say, "Oh, it's just a Category 1 or it's just a Category 2." Well, that doesn't matter. That's not the important thing. The important thing is the surge, what's going to happen to the roads, what if you don't want to get stuck. So if one of our local counties issues an evacuation order, pay attention and go. I know especially if you're staying on Ocracoke, because the ferries can only run until the winds get up to a certain level. And we will go into evacuation mode where we just keep running ferries until we can't run them anymore. But if you're on Ocracoke, especially since that's the only way on or off is via ferry, if they give you an evacuation warning, go. Don't wait, just go.
I think something that kind of gets lost in all of this is after the storm, NC12, a great example where you may have surge issues with sand on the road, power issues. Those are barrier islands, so you got to get all that equipment out there. So honestly, it's after the storm as well where you may not have any power, you may not have ability to move around. And normally in the hurricane season, it gets pretty hot after those storms. So air condition is very vital. So that's also an important thing to think post-storm, what the conditions are going to be like.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, but if it's a fairly serious storm, you have to worry about getting the emergency workers in here that will restore power, that will repair the roads, that will get things back to normal eventually. But those are the people that need to be here after the storm. And not necessarily vacationers. So that's another thing to keep in mind. If there's an evacuation order and a storm is coming, you really don't want to be here during or after the storm right away. So again, if one of our counties issues an evacuation order, pay attention and go.
And speaking of hurricane, and I know you working with NCODOT, I'm not going to ask get like in the very specifics, but I'm sure you guys monitor the weather forecast and these hurricane forecasts. I mean, what does the department itself, how does it get prepared? Do you guys, before maybe a storm system is moving into the area, do you kind of have like a local hub that everybody goes to, and then after the storm disperse from there? Or what are the inner workings of NCDOT with storm systems?
We keep very, very well aware of any storm that's out there, whether it's a hurricane, tropical storm, like you said, a nor'easter, even a king tide, and we get prepared. We have what we call dune tunes, which is where we embellish the sand dunes that protect the road from the ocean. We get all that ready, and then we get equipment in place. There are a few hot spots on NC12 that we know will be the first to experience overwash if that's going to happen. So we will stage equipment there, get everything ready, and be ready for whatever the weather gives us on any storm. So yeah, we stay prepared and we stay well aware of the weather. I guess if there's one good thing you can say about hurricanes and tropical storms is that you can see them coming days, sometimes even a week in advance. So we keep aware of that. If something's headed our way, we get ready and we let people know.
One other thing, and then we can kind of wrap up here. Unfortunately, if people do decide to stay, even though evacuation orders are out there, and you kind of hit on this, the emergency workers out there, something that we preach, I know you guys preach as well, NCDOT, do not drive through flooded roadways, but unfortunately, we still see people doing that. And, I guess my question to you is, if that happens, you guys can't send out crews when the weather's bad, correct?
Right. Yeah.
So it's important to follow all of those rules out there. Don't drive through standing water. Best case scenario to evacuate, because when the conditions are at the worst, you guys are kind of hunkered down, waiting for the storm to pass so you can get out there and do your work.
And not only that, but keep in mind it's the Outer Banks, and NC12 is the only way on or off Hatteras and P Islands. So if you're staying in Rodanthe and we get a storm and we have to close NC12, you're going to be there a while. The ferry division does have an emergency route that we will, in case NC12 gets breached, that we will run between Hatteras Island and the mainland. But that takes a few days to get up and running. And if you're on Hatteras Island, if you're on P Island and you don't evacuate, you may be there a while. And that's something to keep in mind. If you have to get back to work, or if you have to get back to school, or you have to, be somewhere when your vacation is over and there's an evacuation order, NC12 is the only way on or off. And if it gets breached or if there's overwash and we have to close it, there's nowhere really to go.
And those are great words to kind of close on there. Tim, for those who may be, again, vacationing, I know you've mentioned some websites and some social media handles. Would you mind going over those one more time so our folks can maybe jot those down or follow them on their social media so they can stay aware of the conditions out there on the Outer Banks?
Yeah, absolutely. On Facebook, there's NCDOT NC12 Facebook page. There's a ferry system, NC Ferry System Facebook page, and they both are on X as well. And again, all road closures, ferry closures, anything like that will be on drivenc.gov, and that's where you can get current conditions. Even if it's closed by a car wreck, that will be on drivenc.gov. So that's a really good resource to have as well. But you have those social media accounts, NC12, ferry system. And those are good to keep up with in case of any sort of weather issues.
Well, Tim, we appreciate your time. And for those who are listening or watching, maybe traveling out to the eastern North Carolina to the Outer Banks, I hope that you'll take that information with you, kind of just store it away in case we were to see some storms pop up. That way you have all the information you need. And Tim, again, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. We know you're very busy this time of the year, so thanks for spending a few minutes with us. And thank you all for who are listening and watching for tuning in. And we will see you back here soon, real
Well,
soon.
thanks for having me.